Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, I wanted to give you some information on how business analysts can master the art of slicing the cake. So let's get into it. So Bill Wake had actually did a comparison of a complex system to a cake. So first, before we get into what is slicing the cake, let us see how we can compare a cake to a complex system that is being built. So a cake, which is nothing but the product, consists of different layers, okay, as you can see in the image. So these layers are similar to the layers that exists for an application. So every software application or product consists of different architectural layers. So if you see here, you have the front end, security layer, middleware, back end, network, databases. So you have a lot of layers. So it's similar to the cake. So now, when you want to slice down a cake, okay, or if you want to slice down the development effort, there are two ways in which you can slice it down, okay, or you can kind of organize the development work. So one is you can do it layer by layer. You can split up the work layer by layer, which is horizontal, or you can do it slice by slice. So when you cut a cake, this is what a slice is. So every work you can cut it down into slice by slice. So these are two modes of slicing down a cake, or if you compare it with an application, these are two ways in which you can slice down an application. So let us see what is the difference between horizontal slicing versus vertical slicing. So in horizontal slicing, when you slice down an application horizontally into different layers, it's called as horizontal slicings, and your stories become horizontal stories, which means that the product is developed layer by layer, okay? So every layer is being developed and then the second layer is being developed the next after only the subsequent layer gets completed. So the stories also which you build and you write is layer by layer, okay? So the stories provide value to each layer owners and not the end user. For example, let's say we have all these layers of the application, okay? And let's say you have a user story. For example, the user should be able to view the profile form. So that's related to the front end, the UI, okay? So if you look at that story, it does not have any backend. For example, you're just saying that the user should be able to view that form and they will be able to enter details, but they will not, the details that they enter would not get stored. Okay, so there's no backend involved, it's just front end. So when you look at the value that that particular story is going to deliver, it's not going to be valuable to the end customer. But if you see for the designers and for the front end, for them it's a value because that particular section of work is completed. Okay. But always when you develop a story, the main aim should be that there is some value being provided to the end customer. Okay. But when you look at this approach, every horizontal story, okay, is going to be valuable to that particular layer owner. For example, if there's a back-end story, it's going to be valuable to the developers. If there's some technical story within the system, it's not going to be really valuable to the end customer because the end customer doesn't want any optimization, whatever. They just want the output, okay, which we are not giving it fully. So this is what is the drawback with horizontal slicing. Another one is, if you see here what I was explaining earlier, the front end stories become valuable to designers. The security layer becomes valuable only for the security team because that's what they are concerned with. The middleware, backend, network, databases, all these are valuable to the developers, the database admins, the infrastructure team, etc. They are all concerned with this layer. Okay, but if you see the end customer, they are very interested in all the layers, not just with one layer. So just delivering some front end story or some security related story, as I said, is not going to be beneficial and provide value to the customer, but it would be for only those particular layer stakeholders. So if you see the drawbacks of these horizontal stories is that the user will have to wait for all the layers to be completed to get the entire product. Okay, so let's say that you're ordering a cake, okay, and the full cake is going to be your end product. But what happens if the baker tells you, you know what, I'll be able to just give you the first layer? That's not going to provide any value, because what are you going to do with only one layer? That is, for example, the toppings. It's not going to give you any use. Okay, so the user has to wait for the entire product to be complete in order to make use of a feature. Let's say, for example, you want to fill up your profile form in an application. Just giving, imagine if that particular project owners, they tell you, you know what, you'll be able to view the form, you'll be able to enter details, but if you click submit, the details are not going to be saved. Totally doesn't make any sense. They tell you that the back end is not ready, front end is ready. You'll be like, I don't care whether there's a front end, all I need is my details to be saved. So that's what is the drawback with horizontal stories. Okay, you have to wait for the entire product to get ready, all the layers to get ready in order to get even one feature out. Okay, and there is a high risk also involved in this if the end product is not as per the customer's requirements. Let's say, for example, you ordered a cake and then you get to see that cake only at the end. You have no idea of the layering, you don't have any idea of the toppings, you have no idea of the very flavor. So you don't even get to see it also in between, how it's being shaped up, what are the flavors being used, nothing, you know. So it's similar to a product that you're building. If you're going to build a product and the user is going to get to have a look at it only at the end, there's a lot of high risk involved, because there is a possibility that the requirements you gathered may not be as per the user's expectations or requirements. So there's a whole chance of a scope change and unsatisfied customers. Another one is this particular approach cannot accommodate changing requirements. Okay, so sometimes users may want, you know, something extra, they might want something to be tweaked, but already you're working on one layer, and then you have the second layer, you have a third layer to be done, and then overall the user gets the product in the end. So there's no chance of the user even giving a feedback saying, hey, you know what, I don't want these toppings, I want, you know, maybe something to do with chocolate or nuts, something like that. So it's similar to a product also. Following this approach of development is that you cannot accommodate any changing requirements or feedback. Also, as I mentioned, customers will not be able to provide timely feedback because they're going to get to see the product only at the end, and even whatever stories, horizontal stories you're going to give to them is not going to be of any value. So this horizontal slicing approach is very, very much like the traditional waterfall approach, where you develop one layer at a time. Okay, first you do the requirement gathering, you do the designing, then it goes for development and so on. So this is the, when you slice stories down, if you're only having a front end story, only a back end story, ultimately you need to keep in mind that it's not going to create any value for the user. Okay, so that's what, if at all this is what you're doing, then definitely that you're splitting stories horizontally, and as long as at least those front end and back end stories are within the same iteration, at least both would go in together, and at the end of the launch you would have both together move to production for the end customer to use. But only having a front end or back end, totally definitely it's not of any use to the customer. So having seen what horizontal stories are, the next one is vertical stories, where stories are going to, where the cake or the product is going to be sliced vertically. So here the product is developed slice by slice, okay, and each slice of the cake or the product represents a feature of the product. So the whole cake is the full product, and every slice is going to be features that make up the entire product. So every story, okay, that you pick up has all relevant architectural layers. So if you see here, imagine this to be a slice of the cake. Now imagine that you're not able to get the full cake, but you're getting a slice of the cake. Still, it's going to delight customers because they get to have the taste and feel of the cake, they get to have the benefits of all the layers of the cake, which is definitely delivering value and delighting the customers. So, if you take a story, okay, a story is also going to have all the layers integrated into it. It's going to have a front end, it's going to have a back end, any security related conditions which are there, that would be there, the network, APIs, everything would be covered in one story. Okay, so the stories, if you see the end story, it's going to provide value to the end user, because say for example the user wants to fill up their profile form. Okay, so it's not just they get to see the form, they get to enter the details. Whatever details they enter is going to be saved and they can view the details back. So there's a lot of front end, back end, and a full end to end completion of that one feature. So it's definitely a value to the customer. Okay, so I hope you're getting some idea of what vertical and horizontal stories are. So with this in mind, take an example. Let's say the customer wants an e-commerce application, okay? And every slice, as I said, every slice is a feature of the product. So let's say here we have a feature where the user should be able to place an order. So when placing an order, we are not just saying like horizontal stories. We are not just saying the user will be able to choose the product and then they'll be able to add the product. Whatever product was chosen and added needs to go and get saved in the database, and it needs to show that the order is placed. So if you see the story over here, it's going to have choose product, add product, then you preview the order, and then you place the order. Similarly, when the user places the order details would get stored in the DB. Also, only users with accounts can place orders. So there's some authorization also that is in place. So this is a end-to-end story which has all the layers of a product. Okay, and in the end, it's going to provide value to the user. So this is how you need to build a entire product, feature by feature, and this is what agile is about: continuous value delivery and feedback. So with the old e-commerce product, you get to choose the main core features, the important features. For example, placing an order, leave the promotions, discounts, etc. The main goal of an e-commerce is to view products and place orders. So if you're able to get that out first, then it's a value to the customer. So that's about vertical slicing. So always make sure that you slice your stories in a way that the story has an end-to-end acceptance criteria that can be usable and valuable to the end customer. So if you see, the benefits of using this vertical slicing is that the user keeps getting value continuously. That is, even if the entire product is not complete, important features are available for the user. So the customer needn't wait for the entire product to be completed just to place an order also. So they get the feature of placing an order while other, nice to have features get developed. Also, the customers would be able to provide timely feedback. So sometimes when customers get to see what is done, they would have ideas coming in, they would know and they'll be able to validate that if it's exactly what they want or it's something different. So people tend to think more when they see something, and that's what this vertical stories tend to deliver. Also, it can accommodate changing requirements. So before building the entire product, if there's something that needs to be changed or added, it can be done and we get to know that earlier. So this is the real way in which agile works. So it's the agile approach of incremental and iterative delivery. So continuously you're delivering value to the customer as well as you're going to get feedback, and not asking the customers to wait like for the end product. Okay, so there are a lot of challenges when adopting to vertical slicing. Okay, so Of course, some people would be thinking, you know what, you can still, split stories horizontally, vertical. There can be back end stories, there can be front end stories. Yes, they can, because that's the way some organizations still work. It's the waterfall way of approach, where each layer needs to be completed and then moves on to the next layer. So it's okay to have only front end and back end stories, but if you see, they don't deliver that value, or they don't deliver it to the user, because it's going to be really not valuable. It's not going to provide any value to the customer. Okay, so the main challenge is that most companies still have to move from waterfall, the traditional way of software development, to agile. Okay, and there are a lot of companies that are actually moving because they are seeing the real value of it. Businesses are changing continuously. Businesses are like, every time customers are coming up with different demands. So businesses their needs change, customers demands change. So in that way, even in that scenario, the project requirements also change. So if you're going to have a rigid waterfall approach, then you can never accommodate these changes. So generally, it's this mind shift. Resistance to change is something which is a great challenge of moving from horizontal to vertical. Still, people cannot digest the fact that there can be requirements that change in between. There can be, like, continuous delivery. People with the waterfall mindset approach, it would take some time for them to contemplate on how agile works, unless they get to work in it. Also, if you see, still, we don't blame anyone, but that's the traditional way of working. Because if you see, when let's say a database admin, they want to design the database architecture, they need to know all the different nuances of that particular product, so that they would be able to build the appropriate database. They would be able to make decisions on the infrastructure, on the network side, etc. And that's definitely valid. So these are some ways in which it creates like a challenge of moving from a horizontal to a vertical way of development and execution. And while this product is compared to a cake, you might be thinking, what if every horizontal layer is done and then you just place one on top of the other? You just layer it and you get your full cake. Well, for baking, that's easy. But imagine doing it for a product. You have different layers that are all working in silos, but then trying to integrate everything together is not a easy task. It's not a joke. It's definitely very critical and very tough doing it when compared to vertical slicing. So you as a BA, what you can do, if at all you I want to provide value to the customers, make sure that if it's an agile way of working, make sure that every story you split consists of front end and back end. It's end to end and it's valuable to the end customer rather than the team. So you can split a front end and a story, a back end story, provided that those two stories which are linked to a feature are in the same iteration and go together. If one front end story is going to be in iteration 1 and the back end in iteration 2, then there's no point of you releasing that one front end story to the customer. It's going to be pointless. So always try to keep all your iteration stories intact and valuable to the customer. So that's it for story slicing. So that's about slicing the cake. So whenever you split stories, make sure that it's valuable to the customer. So that's it for this video. I hope that this was informative. So if you like this video, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to this channel and do share your feedbacks. Thank you.